G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome for part 1 of what is going to be a 3-part series of Beyond Survival Guides. I want to take you guys through some of the different tips and pieces of knowledge I've managed to pull together about actually staying alive in Beyond League, which does seem to be a difficult thing to do. I mean, I'm not level 100 like Etup or anything, I'm only level 88, but I'm still on my first character. I've managed to not die, and in addition to accruing some of my own personal information through playing in the league pretty extensively, I've also been checking out various streams and of other successful people in Beyond League and sort of pulling together some info about what all these people do that are still alive and what they do well to be able to stay alive. So, let's jump into it with first some general tips and tactics for staying alive in Beyond League. So the first thing to know that in Beyond, DPS is king. We talked about this a bit on the podcast about us getting the feeling that the game is shifting in hardcore more towards the DPS ends of the spectrum. If you can kill stuff fast, the game is going to be a lot easier. Now, this has always been the case, at least partially in Path of Exile, that DPS would make things easier. The good offense is often a good offense is often the best form of defense, as the old adage goes. But in Beyond League, it feels even more the case. Now, a lot of these things that we fight in the Beyond League, especially from the Beyond mobs, are more dangerous the longer they're on the field. There's a lot of things like degens, like Unrighteous Fire and Chaos Degen. There's some that will close in on you if you're a ranged fighter. If you can kill them before they get to you, you're going to have much greater survivability. And there's a lot there that just do really high amounts of damage, and getting them off the field quickly is going to make things a lot easier for you. So just killing these things before they can get to you, or before they can cause any real problems, or before multiple packs of Beyond monsters can stack up, is going to make things a lot easier. So good single target or good small AoE DPS is going to be king. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So in addition to having good DPS, this can also be just having passive DPS, so the ability to do damage to enemies while you're actually kiting, or while you're moving away from them, or while you're keeping yourself out of harm's way. Now, this could be through the use of things like totems. Shockwave totems have proven very successful, and a lot of people I've seen, namely Pox, playing shockwave totems have been doing a very good job of staying alive to everything but Ice Nova lockboxes, of course, because you can't DPS them down. But It also means things like puncture are very successful as well. A lot of strength of puncture comes from the fact that it does DPS while you're able to kite. You're able to shoot it once, so place the puncture on the field, and then you can move away from the mobs and reposition and keep yourself in safety, like keep yourself safe, while monsters actually die. So if you're able to do a lot of DPS and kill things before they reach you, or if you're able to deal DPS in such a way that you are able to keep yourself safe and keep moving, so there's either minions or totems or puncture or anything like that that you can do, even like Righteous Fire, all of these things are going to keep you much safer and going to keep you alive. So I mentioned kiting. This is also kind of its own separate category as well. Kiting or repositioning, or just having good positioning in general. This isn't just limited to ranged characters either. It's not just for the bow characters, it's also for melee fighters as well. Positioning themselves well is going to make a huge difference. Keeping yourself, if you are a ranged character, out of Unrighteous Fire range, out of that Flame Surge range, out of that Chaos is going to be very important. Not getting trapped with Chaos Degen, beetles dying and spreading tar behind you when there's dangerous mobs in front of you is also going to keep you alive. Positioning is super important, so if you're sort of unsure about positioning, the best thing I think to recommend to do is to watch streamers or watch VODs of people playing high-level maps and beyond and dealing with these different things. How do they position? How do they approach the different packs of monsters? Pay attention to these things, because these are the things that will really separate you and what will really keep you alive in Beyond League. So moving down the list, next up is keeping mobs actually away from you. So like hard keeping them away from you. Kiting is its own thing. Kiting and positioning is keeping you away from the mobs, but there's also ways of keeping the mobs away from you. A good example of this that almost anyone can use is the Decoy Totem, the Decoy Brotem, and he earns that name because the Decoy Totem, I think, is one of the #1 underrated skills in the game. I'm not using it on my build at the moment because puncture is OP and I can kill stuff before it gets to me, and I use another feature which I'll talk about in a second, but Decoy Decoy Totem, if I didn't have that ability to keep these mobs away from me, Decoy Totem would be my first choice just there. Putting a Decoy Totem behind a nasty pack of Beyond mobs is going to either buy you a few seconds as they turn around to attack it, or it's going to draw them away from you even then. And even if you're a melee character, you can use this. Place it on the other side, they will use their flame surges or whatever other attacks they have on the opposite side of the pack, and you will be able to DPS them in safety. Decoy Totem is fantastic. Other examples can be Frostwall. I've seen people use cast when damage taken Frostwall, or even self-cast Frostwall with certain attacks, especially if you have some sort of piercing ability or an ability that can fire over or through the Frostwall, can work fantastically. And then minions. If you're playing a traditional style summoner, minions can keep the enemies away from you as well. And then there's Knockback, the ugly cousin of good defensive abilities. Knockback has forever been never really liked much in Path of Exile, but I think it's making a comeback, especially in bow builds. The King of the Hill passive, which is a fantastic crit cluster already, also gives you knockback on crit. And I'm seeing this more and more in bow builds, and I'm coming to love this more and more. I'm using greater multiple projectiles with Tornado Shot on my build, for example. That puts out 20 projectiles each shot. Each of those can knock back enemies when they crit, and when it crits, they all crit at once. So you can hit a single enemy like 4+ times with this, which is 4+ knockbacks, and it gets very difficult for melee mobs to even get to you. So if you can knock them away and keep them away from you, then this is going to work. Shockwave Totem's also good at that too. Next is good old-fashioned crowd control. I'm talking stuns and freezes. Perma-stun builds have been doing quite well, as have perma-freeze builds, especially Ice Spear crit builds I've seen doing fantastically. And these things are all about proliferating freezes or just hard freezing everything on the screen. Beyond mobs aren't very scary when they're frozen. Some of them will still have degen auras, but a lot of the really dangerous things they actually need to move to do. So being able to freeze them, even with their high life, it's still possible to freeze them using something like Ice Spear. That can be very effective. So if none of these other things work for you, then consider trying to perma-stun these mobs or trying to freeze them until you can DPS them down. Now next up is something that transcends class and ability and DPS levels and any of this other stuff I've talked about, and this is Flasks. Your Flasks are absolutely crucial to staying alive in all of Path of Exile, and even more so in Beyond. Those Flask mods are super important. So firstly, have your Flasks up to date, use the correct Flasks, and use the correct mods on those Flasks. So let's go through some of the most important ones. Firstly, we have Remove Freeze. This is mandatory. You need a Remove Freeze Flask or you're going to get yourself killed unless you have something like Alpha's Howl that's preventing freezes anyway. Remove Freeze should be on one of your flasks. I use it on one of my life flasks, something that I can spam often and something that I do spam often and something that is always available to me. So don't put it on something that usually ends up empty. Keep it on something that you will always have a charge for. Now, this is going to keep you alive through various types of the Beyond mobs, one of the nasty Beyond bosses, and probably even more importantly, because lots of people die to these, freezing lockboxes. Freezing lockboxes are absolutely brutal, and they will destroy you. A freezing plus Ice Nova lockbox can be very, very dangerous, and that Removes Freeze Flask I think is absolutely mandatory. Next up, we have Topaz and Ruby. You can kind of use whichever of these use your class's weakness. For example, I'm using Purity of Lightning, which gives me extra max lightning resist, so I kind of get away without a Topaz flask. Overall, I think a Ruby is more potent to have. More of the dangerous things seem to come in the fire variant. You've got those Unrighteous Fire Flame Surges, absolutely brutal. You've got the fire bosses, dangerous. Detonate Dead Beyond mobs, these are extremely dangerous as well. And then there is things like fire-based exiles, which can be the two most dangerous exiles are fire-based. So having a Ruby flask is never really a bad idea. If you can sacrifice one of your flask slots towards this, then you can do that. Now the good news is you can put something like Curse Immunity on that as well, or another mod. You can put, Removes Freeze on it if you want to. You can keep something on there that will be useful as well, so you can double up and get double value out of that. And otherwise, if you're already like running a lot of fire resistance or something in your build, then you can use a Topaz flask instead. That can be very handy as well. And then next up is one I think people overlook still a little bit, even though it's a very powerful flask, is Atziri's Promise. Now, I would suggest to use like a Chaos Resistance flask, but why use one of those when you can use an Atziri's Promise? Atziri's Promise in nearly all builds is like a huge damage buff, as well as giving you a bit of extra life leech, and then on top of that, it gives you a huge amount of Chaos Resist during its effect. Now, there are some pretty nasty Chaos mobs in this, and unless you have very high Chaos Resist from your gear, this Atziri's Promise is going to be a good way of dealing with those. Those little Chaos Degen beetles, they don't look very dangerous, but when they die and spread tar and then have a nasty Chaos Degen on top of that, and then there's Poison Clouds that they've shot out as well, yeah, they're pretty deadly. So if you can run an Atziri as promised in your build, if you can manage to get away with running one, I can't quite fit one into my build, but if you can, then do run one of those and it's going to help you out quite a bit. Now the final thing is something that I've noticed across all of the really successful builds, and I mean successful in the sense of people's builds that are still alive in Beyond League, or that haven't died in Beyond League, or are doing well in Beyond League and maybe died to something freak accident, is partial or full immunity to some damage types, or multiple damage types depending on the build. So a good example of this is dodge and block. I'm able to use dodge in my build. A lot of people will use max block builds, some people will combine the two, and there's even Rumi's Concoction that gives you extra block as well, and literally anyone can use that. Block and dodge are both full immunity to different damage types, and if you can get a bit of spell block as well, it's going to help against some of the really dangerous things in Beyond League. Next up is sometimes your build will also give you pure immunity to things as well, which can be very dangerous. A good example is my build uses Ondar's Guiles, and it is an evasion based build. This makes you nearly immune to projectile attacks. It means that projectile attacks most often miss, and they very, very, very rarely ever crit you. Now this has saved me probably countless times. I don't even know because I never take damage from them, but from some of the more dangerous mobs, like the tornado shot archers, for example. You guys have probably seen a few high profile deaths to those tornado shot archers because their potential for shotgunning and their high damage, it has been nerfed, but their high damage still is very, very dangerous, and Ondar's Guile is something that just gives me pretty much immunity to that. So your build can also give you some sort of immunity like that. And then the final one, which almost anyone can use, is Immortal Call. This is flat out fizz damage immunity. You can either use Immortal Call on a lazy person setup, like I am, which is a cast when damage taken, Enduring Cry, Immortal Call, increased duration setup. That's a level 7 cast when damage taken, all the rest follow that. Now on this sort of setup, this is great for an evasion based character. For example, you take a bit of damage and then your Enduring Cry goes off and your Immortal Call goes off, and it gives you a couple seconds of physical damage immunity. This is great for when you take bursts of physical damage, physical reflect, and if you take some nasty flicker strike damage from those sword bros who are very, very scary with their flicker strikes. And if you don't want to run the lazy person setup, if you're a little bit more active and you really want to ensure survivabilities, you can have pretty much 100% Immortal Call uptime setup by using a quality Immortal Call. You don't need a quality, but quality helps. Enduring Cry, you can have that on self-cast, and you can have Immortal Call on self-cast and link to increased duration, a quality increased duration if you can, and then it's very, very easy, even with, you know, only like a lowish level 1 or even a lowish quality ones, to be able to get pure 100% immunity uptime on this. A good example of this is Hedgie's build recently, which has been shared around a bit. You guys may have seen that. The Immortal Janitor used a lot of Immortal Call uptime to make itself immune to pretty much all physical damage, so it's a very fantastic way to prevent a lot of the really nasty things that come at you in Beyond League. So hopefully you found this list of tips and tactics helpful, guys. A lot of this stuff is very general to all leagues, but I think there's even more focus needed on this stuff in Beyond League because of the new mechanics that have been introduced to the monsters. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video for a bit of a rundown of the actual Beyond mobs and what they do and how to deal with them. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.